There are some names that don't need an introduction. Names that, when whispered in the crowded corridors of Hollywood or shouted across stadiums full of adoring fans, carry a weight, a warmth, a kind of quiet reverence. Keanu Reeves is one of those names, an actor beloved. Not just for his films, but for something far deeper. His kindness, his humility, his almost mythical resilience. But long before Keanu became the internet's favorite human being, before he was crowned the king of kindness, there was a time when Hollywood turned its back on him. A time when he wasn't celebrated. He was mocked, ridiculed, torn apart by the very industry that now sings his praises. It was the late 90s, a golden era for cinema stars, like Tom Hanks, Brad Pitt, and Leonardo DiCaprio, dominated the box office and the award circuits. In the middle of that dazzling constellation stood Keanu Reeves, tall, quiet, almost too reserved for an industry addicted to flash. After the commercial success of Speed and the initial buzz around The Matrix, many critics decided they had seen enough. They painted him with a single cruel brush. Keanu can't act, a wooden performer, a pretty face with no soul behind the eyes. Those were the headlines. They didn't whisper it behind closed doors. They screamed it on magazine covers at award shows and press junkets. At press conferences, you could feel it, the subtle sneers from journalists, the sarcastic questions designed to trip him up, the outright chuckles as if he was some inside joke everyone was in on except him. Keanu would sit there stoic, dignified, answering each question with that quiet politeness he became famous for. No matter how many daggers they threw at him, he refused to throw them back. And to some that made him seem weak, passive, as if he didn't care, as if he wasn't even aware of the ridicule swirling around him. But the truth was, Keanu knew. He knew every word, every laugh, every headline. He just chose to respond in a way no one expected. They wanted a meltdown, a defensive outburst, a bitter speech on a late-night show. Keanu gave them none of it. Instead, he gave them silence, and then he gave them something even better. He gave them work, relentless, back-breaking, soul-testing work. While they laughed, Keanu trained. While they mocked, Keanu studied. While they dismissed him, Keanu was quietly building something that would not just revive his career, it would redefine it behind the scenes. Keanu immersed himself in grueling training regimes. Martial arts, tactical firearms, hand-to-hand combat, not movie fighting, but real-world, brutal, no-cheat code mastery. He pushed his body to the limits, refused to use stunt doubles, refused to coast on star power. He insisted on earning every punch, every gunshot, every headlock audiences would one day see on screen, and all the while, the world kept laughing, oblivious to the storm that was gathering just beyond the horizon. By the early 2010s, most people had written Keanu off. Sure, he was a nice guy, they said, but his best days were behind him. He had become a nostalgia act, a reminder of a bygone era, or so they thought. Because while Hollywood snickered and critics sharpened their knives, Keanu was preparing for something no one saw coming. Something that would silence every skeptic, every cynic, every smug headline writer who ever dared to doubt him. What Keanu Reeves unleashed next wasn't just a comeback. It was a revelation, a masterclass, a cinematic thunderclap so loud it shook the foundations of an industry that had once mocked him. And it all started with one name, one film, one character that fit Keanu Reeves like destiny itself, John Wick. But before we get to the moment that changed everything, let's go back to where it all began, to the ridicule, the humiliation, and the quiet burning fire that Keanu Reeves carried inside him. The fire that would one day turn the laughter of his critics into stunned, awestruck silence. Because the truth is, legends aren't made when life is easy. Legends are made in the storm, and Keanu Reeves was about to show the world exactly who he was. After the roaring success of Speed in 1994 and the mind-bending phenomenon that was The Matrix in 1999, Keanu Reeves should have been sitting comfortably at the throne of Hollywood royalty. His movies had grossed hundreds of millions. His face was instantly recognizable. Studios wanted him. Brands wanted him. The audience adored him. By every account, Keanu had arrived. But behind the cameras, behind the glittering premieres and red carpet smiles, a different narrative was brewing, a colder, harsher one. Hollywood, the same town that built him up slowly, almost methodically, began tearing him down. At first it was subtle, a snide remark here, a sarcastic comment there. Whispered jokes among entertainment journalists, casual digs in late-night monologues. Then it grew louder. Headlines began to appear in major outlets. Keanu Reeves, a pretty face, nothing more. Can Keanu actually act, or are we just fooled by his looks? Articles dissected his performances with surgical cruelty, picking apart every gesture, every line delivery, every facial expression. Wooden, emotionless. A robot trying to play human. Those were the words they used. It wasn't just critics, even fellow actors and directors sometimes joined the chorus. On set, Keanu would occasionally overhear whispers, snickers during table reads, the barely concealed contempt of colleagues who believed they were working with someone far beneath their own talent. Keanu Reeves, they said, was a fluke, a handsome accident. Press junkets meant to promote his films often turned into uncomfortable public roastings. Journalists would pepper him with leading questions, trying to get him to admit that he wasn't really an actor. Some would openly joke that Keanu must have blackmail material on studio executives to keep getting roles. Others mocked his now iconic deadpan delivery, labeling him a one-note wonder who had somehow stumbled into success by pure luck. Imagine sitting there, lights blaring, cameras rolling, every eye trained on you, and hearing people laugh at you. Not with you. Imagine trying to remain composed, gracious, professional, when every part of you is screaming inside to defend yourself. To say, I'm more than what you think. Keanu never lashed out, never stormed off a set, never sued for defamation. He simply absorbed it, all the venom, the humiliation, the cheap shots, and carried it inside like a secret smoldering ember. Things only got worse as the early 2000s arrived. Several of Keanu's films underperformed at the box office. The Watcher, Sweet November, Hardball. None of them captured the lightning-in-a-bottle magic he had once wielded, and the critics sharpened their knives even further. Was Keanu Reeves ever really good? They asked. Or was The Matrix just a fluke? In Hollywood, perception is reality, and the perception now was that Keanu Reeves was fading, was irrelevant, was a joke. Even The Matrix sequels, highly anticipated though they were, became ammunition for his detractors. Sure, they were visually stunning. They said, but did Keanu actually act in them? Or did he just stand there looking confused? Every smirk, every blank stare, every stiff movement on screen was catalogued, memed, ridiculed. Some actors faced with such relentless public ridicule would have retreated. They would have lashed out, burned bridges, or simply disappeared. They would have become bitter, cynical shells of themselves. Keanu could have done that. God knows he had every reason to. Instead, he chose something extraordinary. Patience, perseverance, a kind of quiet defiance. He didn't run to tabloid magazines to tell his side of the story. He didn't sit for teary-eyed interviews bashing Hollywood. He didn't lash out at critics or fans. He didn't even correct the lies or exaggerations being written about him. Keanu simply kept working. He accepted smaller roles, indie films, projects that no longer guaranteed blockbuster success. He took pay cuts so that other actors could get hired. He treated every crew member from the director to the janitor with the same respect. While others demanded luxury trailers and personal chefs, Keanu spent his breaks sitting quietly on the curb, eating a sandwich alone, chatting with fans who happened to recognize him. There's a now famous story of Keanu giving away millions of dollars from his Matrix salary to the visual effects and costume teams, the unsung heroes who made those films legendary. Not because he needed a PR boost, not because it would make a good headline. He did it because he believed they deserved it over and over again. Keanu chose humility over ego service, over self-promotion, integrity over vanity. And slowly, something began to shift. Audiences who once chuckled at the wooden, Keanu began to notice something else. A sincerity, a quiet dignity that was almost impossible to fake. In an industry drowning in artifice, Keanu's authenticity shone like a lighthouse through the fog. People started sharing stories about how he helped strangers without asking for attention, about his random acts of kindness, about his profound empathy in a city known for cruelty. The tide was turning, but Keanu wasn't doing it for redemption. He wasn't chasing headlines or awards. He was simply being Keanu. Still, for all his quiet heroism off-screen, one thing remained: the perception that Keanu Reeves, the actor, was finished, that he was a relic of a different era, that he had nothing left to say on the big screen. Keanu knew this. He wasn't naive. He felt the eyes on him, heard the murmurs behind his back. But instead of letting bitterness consume him, he focused on something else. Something radical. Something that would demand everything he had physically, mentally, spiritually. He decided to rebuild himself from the ground up. He poured himself into intense physical training. Brazilian jiu-jitsu, judo, tactical firearms, handling stunt driving, hand-to-hand combat. He trained for months, for hours each day, pushing his body to its limits, learning skills that even seasoned stuntmen struggled to master. He wasn't preparing for a role, he was preparing for war, because deep down, Keanu Reeves understood a simple truth. He couldn't fight words with words. He couldn't silence the cynics with interviews or quotes. He had to show them, prove to them, not through arguments, but through action, that he was more than what they had labeled him. And so he trained, he bled, he sacrificed. For years, quietly away from the spotlight, Keanu Reeves was forging a weapon. And when the time was right, when the world had completely written him off, when the critics had decided he was done, he unsheathed it, the name of that weapon, John Wick. But what happened next was something no one could have predicted, not even Keanu himself. At the time, no one expected much from John Wick. The studio didn't pour millions into marketing. There were no promises of record-breaking box office numbers, no massive media campaigns painting it as the second coming of action cinema. It was just another mid-budget action flick in a sea of endless releases, starring an actor many believed had already seen his best days. Keanu, however, knew exactly what he was stepping into. John Wick wasn't just another movie for him. It wasn't just a paycheck, another forgettable role in a long line of fading appearances. This was personal. This was war. This was his quiet, calculated rebellion against every voice that had ever doubted him. Every critic who had ever sneered, every Hollywood insider who had whispered that Keanu Reeves was finished. And so when the cameras rolled, Keanu didn't just act. He unleashed. Every punch, every headshot, every heart-wrenching moment of grief pouring out of John Wick wasn't just a character performance. It was Keanu himself, years of restraint, heartbreak, discipline, and perseverance condensed into one relentless force of nature. You could feel it in every frame, the authenticity, the pain, the fury held just barely in check. He didn't just play John Wick, he became him. Keanu's dedication to realism was staggering. He performed nearly all of his own stunts. He learned to reload weapons with breathtaking speed and precision. He trained with Navy SEALs and SWAT teams, running tactical drills until his body moved with machine-like efficiency. He practiced martial arts day after day, absorbing techniques from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, and Krav Maga until every movement flowed as naturally as breathing. When you watched John Wick tearing through rooms full of enemies, it didn't feel choreographed. It felt real, raw, vicious. Keanu didn't look like an actor pretending to fight. He looked like a man who had been fighting his entire life. And audiences noticed word of mouth spread like wildfire. Have you seen John Wick? You have to see it. Keanu Reeves is different. The initial reviews trickled in cautiously, positive at first, then grew louder, more enthusiastic, more amazed. Critics who had once mocked Keanu for being wooden now praised his haunted vulnerability, his astonishing physical commitment, his deep well of emotional authenticity. For the first time in years, Keanu wasn't a punchline. He was a revelation. Audiences around the world flocked to theaters not just for the stylized gunfights and sleek cinematography, but to witness something rare and precious, a man refusing to fade quietly into obscurity, a man who had been mocked, underestimated, and written off, rising without anger, without fanfare, but with a quiet, unstoppable determination. The success of John Wick wasn't just professional redemption, it was personal vindication, and it didn't stop there. The world fell in love with Keanu all over again, but this time not just as an actor or an action hero, but as a symbol of perseverance, of humility, of the kind of enduring kindness and strength that doesn't demand attention, but commands respect. Memes celebrating Keanu's good deeds flooded the internet. Photos of him giving up his subway seat, chatting with homeless people, donating huge portions of his earnings. Stories that had long been whispered became public knowledge. Keanu didn't chase the adulation. He didn't bask in it. He didn't run around giving interviews about how he proved everyone wrong. No, he just kept showing up, kept working, kept being the man he had always been long before anyone cared enough to notice. The world realized something staggering: Keanu had never changed. It was the world that had finally caught up after the runaway success of the first John Wick sequels quickly followed, each more explosive, more ambitious than the last. Keanu poured himself into each film, refusing to coast on the franchise's popularity. Every new installment was another testament to his work ethic, his passion, and his relentless pursuit of excellence. The action wasn't fake. The training wasn't fake. The pain wasn't fake. Keanu bled for those films. He suffered injuries. He pushed his aging body far beyond what most younger actors would ever dare attempt. And he did it all without complaint, without ego, without expectation of applause. Because for Keanu Reeves, the work itself was the reward. The world now chants his name with admiration. Keanu Reeves isn't just respected, he's revered. Fans call him the internet's boyfriend, the last good guy in Hollywood, Saint Keanu. Directors clamor to work with him. Studios trust him to anchor billion-dollar franchises. But none of it came easily. Every ounce of respect he now commands was forged in silence, in hardship, in years of carrying the weight of ridicule without letting it poison him, in years of doing the work. Not for validation, not for revenge, but because it was the right thing to do. And maybe that's why Keanu's comeback wasn't just a professional victory. It was a spiritual one. He didn't defeat his enemies by attacking them. He defeated them by outlasting them, by becoming so undeniably excellent that their laughter turned into stunned silence, by being so authentically good that their cynicism crumbled in the face of his kindness, by standing quietly, resolutely, until the world had no choice but to stand with him. And all of it, every broken bone, every sneer endured, every lonely meal on a curbside, led to one of the most beloved and inspiring legacies in Hollywood history. Keanu Reeves didn't just make a comeback. He made a statement carved not in words, but in actions. A statement that said, "You can laugh at me, you can doubt me, you can call me wooden or lucky or washed up, but I will still be here. I will still be working, still trying, still caring, still becoming the best version of myself, whether you notice or not, because greatness isn't built on applause, it's built in silence." And that is how Keanu Reeves left the world speechless. The success of John Wick wasn't just another hit movie added to Hollywood's endless catalog of action films. No, it was something much bigger. It was the moment the world collectively realized it had made a terrible mistake, the moment everyone who had ever doubted, mocked, or belittled Keanu Reeves had to stop, look in the mirror, and admit they were wrong. And not just wrong, profoundly, embarrassingly, shamefully wrong. The industry that once laughed at him now lined up for a chance to work with him. Directors who once passed him over now fought to pitch him their next big project. Studios that once questioned his marketability now begged him to headline their blockbuster films. Overnight, Keanu Reeves wasn't just an action star. He was a force of nature, a phenomenon, a living, breathing legend. And the beauty of it all, Keanu didn't rub it in anyone's face. He didn't write a tell-all memoir slamming his critics. He didn't go on late-night talk shows to gloat about his success. He didn't post a single self-congratulatory social media update. He didn't utter a single, "I told you so." Because Keanu wasn't fighting for vengeance. He was fighting for something far greater, for his own quiet redemption, for his own peace of mind, for his own love of the craft that had been his sanctuary even when the world turned hostile. And in doing so, he won something that can't be bought, can't be faked, can't be manufactured, genuine, universal respect. John Wick exploded into a franchise, each sequel bigger, louder, and more ambitious than the last. But Keanu didn't change. Not inside, despite the millions pouring in, despite the roaring crowds, despite the endless accolades. He remained the same humble, soft-spoken man who once rode the subway unnoticed. The same man who bought ice cream just so he could autograph the receipt for a fan too shy to ask. The same man who quietly funded children's hospitals without attaching his name to the donations. While Hollywood chased fame and clout, Keanu chased mastery. He continued to train relentlessly between films, mastering new fighting styles, pushing his body past its limits. Even as the years advanced, every punch, every fall, every grimace of pain on screen, it was real, earned, paid for in blood, sweat, and unbreakable willpower, and audiences could feel it. They didn't just watch Keanu's movies, they believed them. They rooted for him, not just because John Wick was a compelling character, but because Keanu Reeves, the man behind the character, had earned their admiration 1,000 times over. Meanwhile, the critics who once mocked him scrambled to revise their narratives. Articles that once sneered now praised Keanu Reeves, a masterclass in endurance. The quiet greatness of Keanu Reeves. From punchline to legend, the reinvention of an icon. Some critics openly apologized, writing retrospective pieces, admitting they had misjudged him, misunderstood him, underestimated him. They cited his work ethic, his humanity, his authenticity, all the things that had been there from the beginning, hidden in plain sight, obscured by their own cynicism. The world realized something profound. Keanu Reeves had never been the problem. Their inability to recognize quiet greatness was as John Wick Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 Parabellum smashed box office records. A new generation discovered Keanu teenagers who weren't even born during Speed or the original Matrix suddenly found themselves inspired by this calm, kind man who defied the Hollywood template. While other celebrities spiraled in scandals, Keanu stood firm, a lighthouse in the storm. And it wasn't just filmgoers. Major brands, video game companies, and streaming platforms all raced to partner with him. His appearance at E3 2019 to promote Cyberpunk 2077, where he spontaneously told a cheering fan, "You're breathtaking," instantly went viral, generating one of the most beloved internet moments in years. He wasn't trying to go viral. He was simply being Keanu. That's the magic authenticity in a world of illusion, kindness in an industry of vanity, work ethic in a culture obsessed with shortcuts. Keanu didn't adapt to Hollywood. Hollywood somehow adapted to him. And for those who once looked down on him, the critics, the colleagues, the anonymous trolls, there was nothing left but regret. A deep, aching regret that they hadn't seen it sooner, that they hadn't believed in him when it mattered, that they had laughed at a man who had quietly, stubbornly, patiently built himself into an unbreakable monument to perseverance. They tried to bury him in ridicule, but they forgot Keanu Reeves wasn't a man you could bury. He was a seed, and under the weight of their scorn, he grew stronger, deeper, more resilient, until one day he broke through the surface and stood taller than anyone ever imagined. Today, Keanu Reeves is not just admired, he's trusted. In an era where celebrity images are crafted by PR teams and polished to an unnatural shine, Keanu remains gloriously, stubbornly human. He stumbles over his words sometimes. He laughs awkwardly. He wears comfortable shoes on red carpets. He doesn't posture or pretend. And that, more than any box office record or award, is why people love him, because in Keanu, we see the version of ourselves. We wish we could be strong, but gentle, successful, but humble, powerful, but kind. He reminds us that you don't have to be loud to be heard, that you don't have to tear others down to lift yourself up, that you don't have to chase validation if you chase excellence instead. Keanu Reeves didn't just resurrect his career. He redefined what it means to be a hero on and off the screen, not with grand speeches or angry comebacks, but with work, with silence, with grace. He taught the world that sometimes the loudest "I told you so" is no "I told you so" at all, just a simple nod, a quiet smile, and the unshakable dignity of a man who knew all along who he was, and now, so does everyone else. In a world addicted to noise, to chaos, to constant validation, there is something quietly revolutionary about a man who chooses silence, who chooses work over words, who chooses to let his actions, not his interviews, define his worth. Keanu Reeves did not reclaim his place in Hollywood with a triumphant speech or a grand campaign. He did not beg for a second chance or demand respect. He simply showed up day after day, year after year, and became undeniable. That is the true legacy of Keanu Reeves. It's not the box office numbers. Although they're staggering, it's not the awards. Although they're well-deserved, it's not even the memes, the internet worship, the countless articles calling him the most beloved man in Hollywood. It's the example he set, the quiet revolution he sparked, the reminder that greatness isn't about shouting louder than everyone else. It's about standing still when the world tells you to fall. It's about being kind when cruelty would be easier. It's about believing in yourself when no one else does. Keanu's journey is not just an actor's comeback story. It's a blueprint for every person who has ever been doubted, every artist whose work was dismissed, every worker whose effort was overlooked, every soul who has ever sat quietly in a noisy room wondering if anyone would ever see them for who they truly are. Keanu's story tells us you don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to fight dirty to win. You don't have to lose yourself to find success. There is power in patience. There is dignity in perseverance. There is triumph in authenticity. And perhaps most importantly, there is a kind of victory that only belongs to those who refuse to be anything less than themselves, even when the world demands otherwise. Today, when people think of Keanu Reeves, they don't just think of Neo or John Wick or Ted from Bill and Ted. They think of a man who survived the fire without becoming bitter. A man who lost loved ones, lost friends, lost favor in the public eye, and still chose to meet the world with kindness. They think of strength without arrogance, fame without corruption, success without compromise. And that in a world that so often rewards the loudest, flashiest, most self-centered voices is nothing short of miraculous. Keanu Reeves didn't just rebuild his career. He rebuilt our faith. Faith that good people can still succeed. Faith that humility can still outshine ego. Faith that perseverance, quiet and steady, can still conquer mockery and doubt. It wasn't easy, it wasn't fast, it wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and because it was real, it lasted. In every theater where an audience cheers, as John Wick takes down impossible odds, in every subway, where a fan shyly approaches for a photo, in every corner of the internet, where strangers swap stories of Keanu's kindness. His legacy grows not as a monument to a movie star, but as a tribute to something far rarer. A good man who never stopped being good, a strong man who never stopped being kind, a successful man who never stopped being humble. And that is why Keanu Reeves, once mocked for being wooden, now stands as one of the most loved, respected, and admired figures of our time. Because in the end, it wasn't the applause that made him a legend. It was the silence, the long, lonely silence he endured. The patient, relentless silence with which he built his life. The powerful, undeniable silence that at last made the whole world stop, listen, and realize they had been wrong. Keanu Reeves didn't need to scream. He didn't need to prove anything. He just needed to be exactly who he was and let time do the rest. And time, as it turns out, has been a faithful witness to his greatness. So if you ever find yourself doubted, dismissed, underestimated, if you ever wonder whether kindness and perseverance are enough in a world that seems to reward the opposite, think of Keanu Reeves. Think of the man who faced a storm of laughter and kept walking. Think of the man who was buried under mockery and grew into a giant. Think of the man who taught us all that the quietest voice, when it speaks with truth, when it speaks with heart, can echo louder and last longer than 1,000 screams. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find the strength to keep walking too. Because somewhere quietly, without fanfare, without noise, greatness is waiting for you too, just like it waited for Keanu Reeves.